Story 1. I've been thinking about this topic for a long time, but as always, it's hard to find an answer without hearing some other opinions. So, if anyone here wants to weigh in to help me, please feel more than welcome to do so. To the actual situation, I've been married to my current wife for almost 3 years, and overall, it's great. We have our ups and downs, just like everyone else, but we've always managed to work out our problems. However, there are a few things my wife does that hurt me deeply, and while she knows it, she continues to do them. First, she always seems offended when I try to maintain a social life with my friends from work. According to her, we never do things together, and it feels like I prefer going out with friends over spending time with her. I would agree with her if it weren't for the fact that whenever I ask her to go out, she refuses. She's constantly exhausted from work because she hates her current job, and it has her stuck in a stressful routine. That means if I couldn't go out with my friends, I would never get to go out. I completely understand how tired she is and how lonely she might feel, but I wonder if she has a right to complain when she's the one refusing to go out. Second, she gets upset with me over the smallest things. For example, last night, we went to a comedy show she had really wanted to attend. Every once in a while, we get the chance to see a famous comedian here. After the show, I asked her if she wanted to grab dinner or maybe have some drinks, but I hadn't decided on a place beforehand. Within 5 minutes, she became extremely annoyed and said, "Let's just go home." Eventually, I found a place for us to go, but from the moment she got upset, she spent the whole time on her phone and barely made eye contact with me. Third, she complains a lot. Sometimes, she even belittles me when she has the chance. For example, her period started last night, and today she told me, "If you were feeling the pain I'm in right now, you wouldn't even be able to stand up." I get that she feels a lot of pain during those times and that it makes her feel awful, but it offends me because she's constantly complaining about pain and exhaustion, whereas I never complain about those things. I don't feel like I have space at home to voice my discomfort, so I just deal with it silently. I never tell her when I have migraines I have a chronic issue with them, even though I know how unbearable they can be. At one point, I seriously considered hitting my head against the wall just to relieve the pain and nausea. On top of that, she often complains about her coworkers, criticizing how they live their lives. One of her colleagues recently went through a breakup, and now she wants to go out and drink. My wife constantly comments on how unhealthy that is and how her coworker should seek therapy. In those moments, I always think, let that woman live her life. That's how she's dealing with everything she's going through. But when I don't agree with my wife, she accuses me of being inconsiderate and not creating a safe space for her. Fourth, and I promise this is the last point, she expects a lot of love and affection from me without giving nearly as much in return. If she gives me a simple pat on the head or scratches my beard, it's considered a day where she's shown me a lot of affection. On the other hand, I'm expected to spoil her constantly. I need to feed her and guess the exact time she'll be hungry, cuddle until she gets hot and pushes me away, or give her massages. Literally, she asks me to massage her calves at least twice a day, every day. I hope I've described everything as impartially as possible because I'm really struggling to figure out if this behavior is entitled or not. It leaves me confused when I feel she should apologize, and she never does. That's something I almost never hear from her, and thinking about it sometimes makes me feel hurt. Anyway, thanks, everyone, for your time, and thank you in advance for any advice or opinions. Stay hydrated. Edit. Thanks for all the insights, everyone. I never expected so many comments in such a short time. To provide some additional context, as several people have asked, I'm 32, and she's 34. We both have a history of toxic relationships. Things aren't always bad. When she's in a good mood, it's like being on cloud 9. What motivated me to post this is the drastic swings between good and bad moments. As many of you pointed out, yes, she's dealing with depression. She has been diagnosed by her therapist, whom she sees once a week. I've even suggested she see a psychiatrist, as I've taken medication for depression in the past, but her therapist doesn't see that as necessary right now. Anyway, I'm still working on my self-confidence. especially given my history of toxic relationships and the fact that my parents were toxic as well. All your responses have given me a lot to think about. Story 2. So this happened almost X years ago, and it just now came to full fruition. The entities and/or people involved. 1. Abe larger store. 2. B franchise inside Abe. 3. D problematic employee of B. 4. C co-worker. Rewind almost X years ago. I'm still employed at B's within another larger, more successful store Abe, and almost at my 7-year mark, with 0 disciplinary marks or unexcused absences, etc., etc. I was pretty well known in the larger store's management and would often resolve issues that stemmed from B being within their store that our current management would fail at or ignore. The work environment grew over my employment at B's to be toxic due to little oversight or follow-through from an overworked management team. It was the standard stuff a lot of places do. Try to dish more responsibilities off to hard workers with promises and/or low pay increases while the crap of the lot got away with we. Unless you flat out stole, you could mess around for most of your shift while the few loyal others worked, and while still getting paid with little to no consequences. Well, this grew to a head, and one day a new employee, D, who was hardly ever sober when clocked in, caused a scene which resulted in me intervening, which resulted in them physically threatening me numerous times in a very aggressive manner, all on video BTW. So, a co-worker, C, while witnessing this called management of B, who flat out told them to not call police despite there being threats of violence, but rather call security within Abe. Highly illegal in my parts, but we will get to that later. So I called security. This whole ordeal resulted in Abe's head of security watching the video and then immediately calling police and searching for D to eject them from the store and/or possibly arrest, completely circumventing B's management. Well, turns out D already fled, so they couldn't eject them from the store, question, or even get their side of the story. Abe thanked me for my cooperation with statements, info, etc. I then called my management at B's and informed them of what happened, gave them a real piece of my mind pertaining to the toxic environment, no cussing, and then told them I would be clocking out for the rest of my shift due to distress caused by their continued negligence. They agreed that would be best, and I left. I was then informed the next day by phone from B that I was being terminated. I calmly said I understood and requested in writing why my employment was being terminated via mail or email. They agreed, and I said thank you and hung up. This caused quite a stir within Abe's, and they expressed how upset and confused they were on how I was being treated to B. Well, the next day I get that email from B, and it says I was being fired for calling security and contributing to a dangerous situation. Okay, cool. You want to play it that way? Fine. I got right to work getting my ducks in line for the eventual appeal. I knew they would file against my initial unemployment claim. Witnesses, pictures, events I had cataloged, etc. The whole shebang. The day comes when the judiciary calls me and I plead my side of the case. After a long phone call where I meticulously laid out how disorganized and toxic my work environment was over the course of my employment, and got information on how to submit evidence, etc., I thanked the agent and we ended the call. About 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the local gov saying that they ruled in my favor. This was incredible, but nerve-wracking to say the least. I knew B would file their last right to another appeal, and this time I would have to do actual court, but on the other hand, this means since there was still a full-blown pandemic going on, I got $$ up front from past due UI payments, and much more money a week going forward than I ever received at a job in my life. But B did eventually file their right to a second appeal. The day of court arrives, and due to the even worse state of the pandemic now, it's held over the phone. The judiciary asks me if I want my witnesses to be present during me and B's questioning, back and forth, etc. I said no because I believed their testimony would be the same regardless, and the trial went on. Well, surprise, surprise, turns out whatever overworked employee B put in charge of submitting their evidence dropped the ball, and zero info was sent to the local gov or sent to the wrong branch. B's representative states they have the evidence on their computer and can send it right now. Judge informed them that that would be illegal and they were required to send in any evidence 2 weeks ago. Judge then really goes at them for obviously not being familiar with the conditions and laws pertaining to this trial, that it was their responsibility to inform themselves or, actually read the paperwork they sent explicitly stating them. At this moment, I was air-fisting while this was going on and muting my phone so they didn't hear Peggy Hill like, "Oh yes." So with their evidence being non-existent and my witnesses being very much real and pissed off, the trial pretty much went in my favor. And their rep continued to act pretty entitled, annoyed and unaware and apologetic of their ignorance of local laws, like telling an employee who feels scared for their physical safety to not call 911. I don't think B's rep once said, "Thank you, you're welcome, your honor, sir," or "ma'am," etc. the entire trial. Well, time comes and my witnesses did even more than I thought. They shed light on situations I was not even privy to and even corroborated a lot of what I presented and more. My favorite part was when the judge asked, "They told you not to call the police?" and the subsequent frustration from the judge after the witnesses confirmed. The trial ends and we're informed the ruling will be mailed to each of us in another 3 weeks. So, 3 weeks passed and I got a large letter informing me that again, I won the appeal, and it even went on to explain in detail the laws that my employer was ignorant of, ignored, or refused to comply with, which was even more than my initial research and testimony showed. I finally felt relief and got to enjoy the rest of my vacation, or paid mental health sabbatical, with enough money to pursue other avenues of work at my leisure, with no worries of retribution or having to pay the local govt back. This ended up with me eventually taking on far less hours at a much higher pay rate in a different field I've had my eye on, which has raised my quality of life so freaking much. Fast forward to now. Abe has bought out B and taken over majority control due to B's inability to generate revenue with a continual revolving employment door. Oh, I wonder why. And has extended an offer for my original job back with a substantial pay increase and benefits package with far less hours to commit to, and with an in-writing statement saying that if in the future I want a full-time contract with even better pay benefits than my current offer, they are fully prepared to sign me on, would be thrilled if I choose to cross that bridge, etc. The real cherry on top is that B failed to disconnect me from some groups, among other things, after firing me, so they got to see my new job announcement, my old co-workers, and new MGMT from Abe excitement around it, and there is nothing they can do about it, Mao. Oh, and I framed that last letter detailing my final victory. I don't usually get to win much in life, but now I got a reminder of a W hanging on the wall. Oh yeah. Story 3. So a few years ago, I worked as a valet for one of the biggest hotel chains in the world. It was the best job I ever had in regards to the pay. I took home thousands of dollars a month. It may not sound like a lot, but I was 20, so it was a big deal for me. I had started in the summer. Come winter of the same year, it's 2 days before Christmas, and relatively slow. There's me and one other person working the front drive. I tell him I want to go home early, so he goes for his break. Out of nowhere, a truck comes speeding around the corner and pulls into the driveway and stops in a way that would impede traffic. I take a gander, but decide not to approach, as they don't appear to need any help, and they didn't bother rolling down the windows or exiting the car. A few minutes goes by and a car pulls up behind the truck. I approach the car, offer the driver assistance, and provide directions to the garage. However, the truck still has not moved, so I approach to ask them to pull to the side. When I approach, the driver does not roll down the window, so I tap on it. The windows are tinted incredibly darkly. I'm greeted by a muffled voice, so I ask if they can roll the window down so I can hear better. Down comes the window, and I'm greeted by this troll doll of a woman. "What do you want? Don't touch my freaking car." Shocked, I politely ask her to pull forward. She rolls the window back up and stays in place. I tap on the window again, but now she's getting out of the car. She puts her chest to mine, or to my abdomen at least. I'm almost a foot taller than her and proceeds to try to push me back. all while screaming profanities in my face and making threats. I'm remaining calm, not letting her get to me, all while asking her to get away from me and to leave me alone. She continues trying to back me down, constantly being in contact with my person. After a few moments, I extend my arms to create space between us, and she attacks. Now I know how this might sound to those of you that are skeptical. I assure you it was the gentlest extension of my arms I could muster. I made sure I didn't shove her or push her down in any way. She returned swinging at my face, scratching and punching me. She had knocked my glasses from my face and threw stomach punches. Now I'm upset. Still doing my best to keep my cool, I defend myself and put her in a front-facing headlock and restrain her until help arrives. In the mix of the whole incident, her daughter attacked me from the back as well with punches and an attempted headlock, but I proved to be too resilient. Told my job I was going home for the day, went to press charges and to seek medical attention. I returned to work the next day to be suspended pending investigation, all while being assured by my manager, "Yeah man, don't even worry about it, it's just corporate's dumb rules." Mind you, the entire incident was filmed by the hotel's security cameras, so I had no reason to lie or feel like my job was in any danger. I subsequently got fired for said incident and had assault charges brought against me from my assailants. We go to court, and these birches don't even have lawyers, sitting in the courtroom laughing and making snide remarks. My defense lawyer had subpoenaed the tapes and brought them in as evidence, which had the charges against me immediately dropped. But that's not all. Now the DA had picked up assault charges against the two of them. They are offered a PBJ probation before judgment and turn it down in favor of a jury trial, all the while still coming to court laughing and giggling, being represented by a public defender. Case goes to trial. Jurors are shown the video which completely backs my story and destroys theirs. This lady is still lying, insinuating I just walked up to her and assaulted her and her daughter. Come to find out this is her fourth time being tried for assault, and she has never been to jail. She gets convicted of second-degree assault, and I'm invited to give testimony at her sentencing trial. I have no criminal record, had a full-time job, am a full-time student, and had a beautiful baby girl less than a week after being suspended and fired from my job. The witch got 2 years, and they cuffed her in court. When the realization that crap just got real for her hit, she begins to cry and sob and look around as if looking for help. It was at this time me and her had locked eyes across the courtroom. I proceeded to stare this witch in the face and do a full-fledged victory dance in my seat as they carried her away. Story 4. Back in the day, I was working the front desk as a receptionist at this massive hotel chain that kicks off with an H. Picture this, a sprawling hotel with fancy chandeliers, plush carpets, and more gold accents than you'd find in a hip-hop music video. I'm talking swanky vibes all around. Now, I gotta admit, I'm not your typical corporate drone. I'm all about that laid-back life, taking smoke breaks whenever the stress starts creeping in. And that's exactly where our little story begins in the parking lot, puffing on a cigarette like it's my personal Zen therapy. So there I am, minding my own business and getting my nicotine fix, when all of a sudden, this shiny Dodge Viper rolls up like it owns the joint. And let me tell you, the driver matched the car's fanciness. Think high heels that could double as weapons and enough jewelry to blind a mole rat. Miss High and Mighty steps out of the car, and before I even have a chance to exhale a cloud of smoke, she's all up in my face. She demands that I park her precious wheels like it's the most natural thing in the world. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all about customer service, but this is the parking lot, not a valet stand. I calmly as someone can while nursing a cigarette, explained to her that parking rides is not exactly in my job description. That's when I drop the bomb. You're looking for our awesome valet service. Ma'am, they're the real car whisperers around here. Now, for those of you who might be new to the concept, valet service is like a magical car concierge. These folks swoop in, park your ride like they're in a James Bond movie, and then hand you a ticket like you're entering a swank club. It's luxury for your wheels, basically. But Miss Fancy Pants is having none of it. She's adamant that I park her car. She starts going off like a firecracker, words flying left and right. And folks, let me tell you, if there's one thing I'm not good at, it's dealing with entitled Karens. So I keep my chill, take another drag of my cigarette, and drop the truth bomb again. Ma'am, I'm on my break, and I'm not exactly the valet superstar you're looking for. But hang tight, I'll get someone who can help you out. Well, that's when the dam bursts. She steps out of her car, looking like she's about to unleash a primal scream that would put any banshee to shame. She's got her arms flailing, hair flying, and she's just belting out how she's some VIP with a capital V and how she's got important stuff to do. Now, here's where I have to give myself a pat on the back. I didn't lose my cool. Nope, I held on to my, I don't get paid enough for this mindset, and I dialed up one of the valet champs to save the day. But, as you might expect, Karen's not done. Oh no, she goes from verbal fireworks to a full-on physical assault. She's throwing punches like a boxer in training and slapping like she's auditioning for a bad reality TV show. And all I can think is, how in the heck did this lady become rich with those moves? Enough was enough. With the grace of a sloth on tranquilizers, I dodged a punch and mustered all the strength I could summon which, let's be real, isn't much, and threw a punch right back. A punch that said, "Hey, lady, I'm a receptionist, not a punching bag." Karen takes a step back, rubbing her cheek like I just slapped some reality into her. She's fuming, her eyes practically shooting lasers at me. And in that moment, I half expected her to transform into a dragon and breathe fire. But here's the kicker, folks. Instead of going all-out Terminator style on me, Karen stumbles back, clearly realizing that I'm not the pushover she thought I was. She shoots me one last death glare, mutters something about getting me fired, and scurries back to her shiny chariot, her Dodge Viper. Now, I ain't proud of throwing a punch, but I'll admit, it felt kind of satisfying to see her retreat like a deflated balloon. As she climbs into her car, she starts revving the engine like she's auditioning for a Fast and Furious spin-off. And just when I thought the drama was over, she rolls down her window, leans out like some kind of twisted movie villain, and hisses, "I'll be back, you just wait." Oh boy, if I had a dime for every time someone said that. But hey, at least she didn't morph into a metallic killing machine with a deadpan, "I'll be back" like Schwarzenegger. She zooms out of the parking lot like she's in a race against time, leaving a trail of tire screeches and wounded egos. I chuckle to myself, shaking my head as I stub out my cigarette. Just another day in the glamorous life of a hotel receptionist, right? But you know what? As crazy as it was, it's stories like these that make the job more interesting than your average 9-to-5 grind. Story 5. This was 7-ish years ago in upstate NY. I had moved there for graduate school and knew no one. The first place I lived was with roommates I found on Craigslist. This was the first place I had ever rented in my life, with my name on the lease, where I was essentially responsible for myself. The roommates I had were shady, and the place was a wreck, but cheap at least. I made a few friends in the first couple of months, and by about November, they were talking about finding places for the following year, which is common in a lot of college towns. 3 of my friends found a place together, and so I decided to find a place with my 2 other friends. We'll call them Pat and Dora. We look around a bit, and end up finding a place a few houses down from our other 3 friends, and sign the lease in late November. Like lots of the housing in this area, it's a house with 2 apartments, one upstairs us and one downstairs we later found out, 4 undergrads, and a shared basement garage. The landlord seems pretty swell too. Included in our rent are snow removal and water. Heat, power, and internet are not. In this area especially, this is common as heat is expensive. Also, chatting with the landlord about this, he explained to us that to have separate billing for multi-unit housing that you need to have separate meters for each unit, legally. He goes on to say that for this, and most properties, this is pretty easy to do for electric, but a lot harder and expensive to do for water, which is why most multi-unit places include water. The school year comes and goes, and we move in at the beginning of June, no problems. Toward the end of August, our landlord calls and tells us he's selling the place. Not to worry though, our lease is still good of course, and the new guy owns some properties already. Cool, whatever, we get the new address to send the check to. The new landlord seems fine. We called in October about a power outlet not working. He got it fixed. He's good about snow removal. No real problems. Also, he's from New Zealand. Tells us he owns a dozen or so properties in the area. We barely interact with the downstairs neighbors. They're all right for undergrads, and, over the course of the year, we only have a half-dozen interactions where we need to ask them to keep it down, because it's 4 a.m. on a Wednesday, or to ask to let someone out who's parked in. Notable is that the school we're talking about here is fairly expensive, and most of the undergrads come from backgrounds with a fair amount of money you'd need to, in order to afford this school or take out a heap of loans. Downstairs neighbors have really nice cars, and a lot of nice stuff in the garage. Seems likely they come from money. They also let us have their bottles and cans to recycle, which is really nice of them, and nets like $10, $20 a week. The school year comes and goes. We move out. I moved out first, over Memorial Day, since I'm working in Asia for the summer, and then moving out of state. I don't see the place again, but ask roommates to clean well enough so that we get some of the deposit back. I don't figure this out until later, but it seems that every interaction with the landlord is something he stretches to the absolute limit of what he's allowed. 30 days, 2 weeks, whatever. I leave for Asia, and in early July, I email Pat and Dora about whether they've received their deposits back. I gave my parents' address as forwarding. They had, and Dora sent me a scan of it. Going through, we each lost $70 for cleaning and damage, and then there was a bill for $52 for the water bill. I don't know how they left it, so I guess maybe it took $70 to clean. So it goes. I remember that water was included in the rent. I bring this up with both of them, which they remember as well. I emailed the landlord and mentioned this to him. At this point, I assume he maybe has a different setup at other properties and made an honest mistake. Accidents happen. I heard back from the landlord 2 weeks later. He asks to see a copy of the lease. Reflecting on this, I assume he thought I wouldn't have access to one since I was in Asia. I have Dora and Pat scan me the lease, mail him a copy, and email it to him. I hear back 2 weeks later. He says he'll send us the money. By the time I get the money, it's late August and I'm home from Asia. Yay, I get my $52 back. Talking to Dora and Pat a few weeks later, Pat had just gotten engaged and was Skyping the whole old crew. I found out neither of them had gotten their $52. At this point, I was angry. Clearly, that was not an honest mistake. Landlord assumed I didn't talk to them, and that they wouldn't find out. Pat and Dora are angry. I am angry. So we dig out the contact information from the undergrads who live downstairs and let them know what's up. We also let the current residents know what happened since we happen to have contact info for some of them. We write them an email, and I provide copies of all of my emails with the landlord and the lease. I hear from Pat and Dora that they get their money 30 days later and that the landlord was a jerk about it. I don't think about it for a long time, even though I'm still in touch with Pat and Dora. About 2 years after this happened, I got an email from a law firm asking if I used to live at the old address and if the landlord was my landlord. I reply yes, and they asked to speak on the phone. Law firm belongs to one of the undergrad's dads. This is how he could afford expensive schooling. Through the course of the conversation, it comes out that the dad was really angry about this, that someone would try to take advantage of his son. He has the time and resources to go scorched earth on the landlord. The dad brings a case against the landlord and has his people comb through all of the landlord's records, former tenants, etc. As it turns out, he's been scamming people like this for quite a while. Pertinent here also was the fact that he didn't have separate water meters. The lawyer explained to me that because of this, the landlord is facing jail time. He apparently did enough of this, and they were able to provide evidence for it, that it rose to the level of some more serious issues like a criminal case over a civil one, I think. On top of this, I'm getting my $70 back, and so are Dora and Pat as part of some settlement deal. landlord might have to sell his properties. The kicker is that, as it turns out, the landlord's legal status could be in jeopardy because of this being a serious crime. I don't really remember the particulars though, to be honest. I really just wanted my $52 back for the water bill. That's all. Story 6. I grew up in a predominantly white area, where life was relatively easy for me as a white student. I had caring parents, respectful friends, and a fairly typical high school experience. Despite being your stereotypical nerdy white boy with glasses, I had a small group of friends and never caused any trouble. Where it begins. In my high school, there was a group of popular troublemakers who were part of the football and basketball teams. They were known for their bullying and disruptive behavior, but they somehow managed to avoid expulsion and became known as super seniors, students who were held back until they graduated or turned 19. They frequently targeted me and my friends with their bullying, but we had grown accustomed to it over the years. During our senior year, we were focused on maintaining our grades while dealing with their antics. In the second semester, I enrolled in engineering physics, a class recommended by my previous physics teacher. I quickly realized that many students saw it as an easy elective where you could simply build cool things and pass. However, the tests were still based on physics principles. The tests were taken in pairs, and one day I found myself partnered with Chad, one of my friendly neighborhood bullies. Chad was known for slacking off in class and relying on the smart kids to do the work for him. Despite this, I decided to show him how to complete the test instead of doing it for him, hoping he would learn something. But Chad dismissed my suggestion, preferring that I do the work for him. When I hesitated, he threatened to harm me or my sister if I didn't comply. Fearing the consequences, I reluctantly completed the test on his behalf. I was angry and scared, but I didn't report the incident to the police or school authorities, knowing it could make matters worse. It took a few weeks for my injuries, including a black eye, lacerations on my face, and a torn earlobe, to heal. But during that time, I swore that Chad would regret everything if I ever crossed paths with him again. Little did I know that our paths would intersect 6 years later. The encounter. Years passed, and I obtained a job with a security company after earning my associate's degree. I primarily dealt with truck drivers, and in the 4 years I had worked there, I had only written 3 major incident reports. One day, Chad unexpectedly walked into my workplace. Initially, I didn't recognize him, but when he handed me his expired driver's license, memories flooded back, reminding me of his repulsive face. I had completely forgotten about Chad, but now he stood before me. Unaware that I knew who he was, I treated him like any other customer. However, I realized this was my chance to make him remember me and feel the pain I had endured. With my background in criminal justice, I knew the laws and regulations in my state, and I decided to use Chad's expired license to my advantage. I instructed Chad to pick up a specific trailer and informed him that the site manager had just called, stating that we would need it later for another load. While this was true and not part of my plan, I seized the opportunity. Chad complained, worried about being fired if he didn't take his break on time, and how he was already on his dispatcher's watch list. His pleas only fueled my determination to waste as much of his time as possible. I called the yard dog, a driver responsible for moving trailers, and informed him that a driver was refusing to drop off his trailer and needed to be escorted off the property. The yard dog arrived, positioning his truck in front of Chad's tractor, preventing him from moving forward. He ordered Chad to immediately unhitch the trailer. For a moment, Chad remained outside his truck, shouting obscenities. Eventually, the yard dog and I retreated to the guard shack in case Chad became violent. Chad made a grave mistake. He hopped back into his truck, maneuvered around the yard dog's vehicle while it was parked at the guard shack, and sped away. I promptly informed my supervisor, who advised me to call the police since trailer theft was a felony in our state. I provided them with the tractor number, Chad's name, a description, and details about the trailer and his direction of travel. About an hour later, a police cruiser arrived, and the officer requested my presence. I provided a detailed account of the incident, acting as a witness and making an official statement for their report. The police eventually apprehended Chad and charged him with a crime. They needed my testimony to build their case, and I made sure to mention his expired license and everything else. To the best of my knowledge, Chad will face at least a year of prison time, as felonies carry a minimum sentence of 1 year. Additionally, he will likely be fired from his trucking company. Although I was merely doing my job, I ensured that the consequences of Chad's actions from all those years ago caught up with him. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read about my experience. I hope some of you found it satisfying. And remember, if someone's job is to tell you what to do, just do it.